All right, hi everyone. On behalf of Access to Integrative Medicine Health Institute, I'm the GW Office of Integrative Medicine and Health. Welcome to A Mindfulness Experience. AIM is a nonprofit organization with the mission to provide vulnerable and low-income communities with access to whole person health and wellness. The GW Office of Integrative Medicine and Health promotes integrative medicine by providing learning opportunities to health professionals and healthcare consumers. Today's facilitators are Dr. Misha Kogan, a leader in the field of integrative medicine and the medical director of the GW Center for Integrative Medicine, and Dr. Deirdre Orceyre, a graduate of the National College of Natural Medicine and the naturopathic medical director of GW Center for Integrative Medicine. So Dr. Kogan, I will hand things over to you.
Okay, hi everybody. Hope everybody's doing okay. And you know the drill. Put questions in the chat. I have a little bit of a talk today prepared. Before I go into talk, an update. And before I do that update, I need to get the copy of the link. So some good news. The news are in the chat. So the Pfizer has published or released the preliminary data on Paxlovid. It's their new drug for COVID. So it's actually a protease inhibitor. By the way, in the scope of things, it's sort of similar to one of the core HIV classes, protease inhibitor class. So it's a similar. It's pretty fascinating that they have developed a drug like this in basically, I'd say, less than 2 years, roughly, or 2-year mark, roughly. So it's a pretty. It took decades to develop the HIV meds. But of course, you know, they're now basing that development on a historic precedence. It's a lot easier. But anyway, so look it up. It looks extremely promising. I don't know the cost of that or what the logistics will be, but I'm guessing they're going to get approved very quickly with this data. It's more than 90%. It's all basically 90% decreased risk of hospitalization or death in infected individuals when started early. The link that I give you is a formal Pfizer link, so it's Pfizer.com, and they actually list the details of the trial there and all the safety data, etc. Chances are it's going to be a pretty safe drug, same as we know with protease inhibitors for the HIV medications. People on them for a long time. This medication will not be a long time pill. Okay, questions on that? Or on anything else? Okay, all right, so I'll go, Tati, keep an eye on the chat just if I miss something. So I'll go straight to a little bit of a talk for today. So, and Deirdre's also gonna talk a little bit about that. So we wanna discuss kind of a winter prep. So as we're heading into a fall and winter, what should we be doing somewhat of a different in terms of kind of our overall keeping ourselves healthy, more prepared for anything that can come our way. And, you know, as we more and more stable COVID-wise, I think it's also important to just say, let's look past COVID. So I think this is a beginning of kind of more broader conversation. So time of the day is going to shrink. There's less light, more priority to get out there early in the day. You know, I've talked about this, probably you're all tired of hearing me saying how important it is to get morning light exposure, both for the immune modulation, but also just for you keeping your general circadian rhythm well optimized. So before 10 a.m., spend some time outdoors. I think importance of this in the winter is higher if you're not one of those people who, no matter what the temperature, is willing to step outside. Get yourself those 10,000 lux lights. They are not as good as sun, but there are approximation. So it's better than nothing, that's for sure. I actually never really did a deep research on that as to sort of what's out there. If anybody have a particular opinion, put them in the chat. So that's one big deal. Second, I think as we're getting into cooler and cooler weather, you do need to know your vitamin D levels. This is often when level sinks. And it's quite common for me to give the entire family some vitamin D in the winter months, including kids who usually don't take any. So that's just something, if you know your level and if you know it tanks in the winter, then optimize it, keep it optimized. Probably 40 and above would be the kind of target level the way I think about it, even though I think the data for that is very minimal, if none, if any at all. This is more based on overarching logic, not necessarily on particular data. This is common sense kind of recommendation because you expect to have a lot less time outside period, and you know, keep checking frequently vitamin D. It's not advisable, and by the way, often not covered. So you may run into needing to pay for those tests, and I don't think it's really essential either. Okay, a little bit about what changes with the diet in the winter, how I see it. This has more to do with a kind of a Chinese medicine angle and maybe to some degree with Ayurveda, that during the winter you want to have more processed cooked foods, not processed like, that's not what that's wrong, it didn't come out right. Process meaning you processing it at home, you cooking it more, you know, so that you get more warmer food. So maybe more soups and less salads, kind of logic like that. Something like bone broth, I'm a big fan of in the winter when, especially, it's kind of expected we're going to get some colds, especially with that in mind. Also, you want to have recovery foods, quote unquote, to be available. So again, those are the easy to assimilate and digest, warm, well-cooked foods. Doesn't mean you drop amount of fruits and vegetables. It simply means that you can have them more cooked. And, you know, when you cook something in a soup, for example, and then you take the whole thing, you're actually not losing much of anything, especially if you drink that actual, what you're boiling the vegetables in, so to speak. I mean, they may fall apart. The folate may fall apart because of temperature, but you'll consume most of the things that are staying inside. So that's in regarding to the foods. I see more importance of sweating in the winter, and that's why in the winter, if you have access to sauna, to me it goes up in the significance, mostly because, remember, sweating is essential for general detox, for ongoing health. And in the winter, even when you're exercising some amount, you may be exercising and sweating less, just simply because it's cooler, especially if you exercise a lot outside. Like, let's say you're running, you may not even sweat. Like, I don't sweat in the winter when I run outside. So you may want to start thinking about how you're going to modify your regimen so you put in more sweat. So that's when, if you have access to sauna, well, absolutely, that's a good idea. If you don't, think of how you could exercise to keep up the sweat. So, yeah, this question about bone broth and high histamine. Well, high histamine is not necessarily a problem. It's not a universal concern. In fact, bone broth would not be something on a very high. I think it's an intermediate level. So a lot of people with high histamine can tolerate bone broth just fine. There are foods that are really truly high in histamines. This is considered intermediate level. So since there's another question, I may as well just handle that. There seems to be a controversy over boosters for all adults over 18. I'm not sure. Can you specify what controversy? Just generally, whether to vaccinate
no, Dr.
or not?
Kogan, there's been some publicity around the CDC and the FDA tangling over whether everybody should get the booster.
I only recommend to high risk, period. I'm going to follow the experts. I'm not going to follow the political. There's no data claiming that the boosters are of critical value for 18 to 65 if your immune function is normal. So I'll follow with that. If that changes, okay, but in my opinion, especially since it appears that in younger people, 6 months is probably, the vaccines probably going to, original vaccines are going to last a lot longer than that. It is the recommendation of getting the booster because the vaccine wanes is based on high risk populations, not on, but it doesn't mean that for example, some of my colleagues at university or in medical school and who's seeing patients, they're opting to get booster now because they concerned that they exposed at the higher level than an average individual. So if your risk is higher, put it that way. And if you do expose, you may expose to a larger inoculum or a larger volume of viral particles. So, it gets somewhat individual there. And at least in our area, I think all 3 states authorized healthcare workers and first line responders to get booster if they want to, even though, let's say, it's not necessarily highly evidenced, but it allows people to feel safer if they want to do it. I'm not getting a booster. I don't feel a need for it personally. I will be keeping an eye on general sense of what's happening, but I feel like knowing myself that I'm usually hyper responder to whatever shots that I'm gonna, but again, that's also where some of the individuality comes in. But if you're in one of the high risks, of course, get it. So, all right. I'm trying to think if I covered everything I wanted to cover. Warm foods. Usually I tell everybody like no cold water before meals. So like never have any ice water when you go out. Like that should just be automatic rule. Just tell them, no, take this back, bring me the room temperature, better yet hot water, just as you don't want to shut down your digestion process by taking ice cold water with food. It becomes even more important in the winter because your digestive fire in the winter is lower, so to speak. Again, this is not based directly on a biochemistry. This is more of an energetic, and Dr. Orceyre can add a lot to that if she wants to. And she has something also to share with you, a couple of naturopathic little points before she gives us the mind-body talk. So the hot water, if you in your restaurant, you can always ask for a little bit of lemon to put in just to kind of acidify slightly the water before eating so that it's further prepares you for the digestion. That's a really good plan. A couple other minor things that people often forget. So now we're all going to have temperature cranked up in the house. Remember, keep your temperature for sleep cooler. So if you forget, that's easy to forget, like right, let's say you put 70 degrees your heater on, and 70 is way too high to sleep at, so you want to drop it 66 or lower. So just FYI, it's especially important for women going through menopause. That appears to be even more critical in terms of keeping the room cooler. That's just one thing that sometimes people forget. They kind of like just forget to do that. I tend to often just open the window in my room if I don't want to or you can just cycle your thermostat, at night to a lower temperature. That's assuming that other creatures in your dwelling are not going to get pissed by that action, but in my dwelling they will be. So I sometimes just open the window. But you have to make the decision for yourself. All right, so that's that. All right. So yeah, 8 to 15. Okay, let's just do the question. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover kind of from the basic things. I don't necessarily decrease amount of exercise in the winter, although sometimes this also comes up that you kind of want to have more rest and sleep and less physical load. I think that's more individual. Some people it's probably true for, and for some it's probably not. So I don't necessarily think it's a universal requirement, so to speak. Okay, all right. There's some questions there, so I'm just going to switch to questions. Already asked this, but anxious, so need confirmation. 74-year-old healthy, had both Pfizer shots 8 months ago, probably had COVID. Okay, well, so this is an interesting question. That point, probably had COVID, does make a big difference. If you have no COVID to be documented, I'd proceed with the vaccine. Which one to get? Good question. That now that crossover is totally fine, if I were you, I'd probably get a Moderna. But remember, get Moderna booster. there seems to be confusion. I see that some people go and get, say, the booster, and then they get the full dose. Remember, the booster is a half a dose. I think we talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever I talked last. So you should make sure that if you're getting a booster, ask them, is this the booster? And if they say it is a booster, clarify. Are you giving me a half a dose? Are you giving me 50 micrograms instead of 100? So because you don't want to get a full dose, it's not necessary, and you may have more side effects. That's basically the bottom line. Okay, a bit off topic, but what is the difference between CBD and CBG? Okay, totally off topic, but I'll answer anyway, since that's a topic I can talk about for unlimited amount of time. So CBG is a cannabidiol, or CBGA, or cannabigriolic acid. It's the prime molecule in cannabis. So it's the number. This is like a master key, right? So all cannabinoids made from CBGA. It's a direct transform, and CBGA can get converted to THC, to CBD, etc. In terms of clinical difference, actually, there's very little data on CBG. I mean, there's very little data on CBD, but there's even less data on CBG. It appears to be a pretty good mood enhancer. So it's an upper, shouldn't be taking at night. So CBD is a slight downer. So if the CBD modulates THC directly, and so there's an expectation of CBD to form, to be a neuroinhibitory, so blocking neuroexcitation. So it doesn't block directly anything, but the way THC works in the body, it enhances block of release of neurotransmitters. So it decreases communication between the cells, especially within the neuroexcitatory pathways. CBG doesn't do that directly. CBG seems to actually stimulate serotonin receptors directly. And that's also what CBD does, but to a very little extent. The THC does it so. And the most important impacts on the serotonergic pathways is actually all acidic forms, CBDA, THCA, and CBGA, CBG, cannabigriolic acid. So those tend to be more direct antidepressants. But yeah, so I tend to use CBD more for anxiety and sleep, and I tend to use CBG more as an adjunct for other cannabinoids if somebody is on a low mood. And it's also appears in several studies, animal studies, having really strong potential as an appetite stimulant. So versus CBD is actually appetite suppressant to some degree. So just also FYI. Okay, what if your feet are freezing in cold sleeping room? Can I leave this off to Dr. Orceyre to answer? And since do you want to talk about this now, or do you want to just kind of talk about this when you just go? I think you should talk about this now, since it really falls more into wellness.
Yeah. Before I do that, I wanted to point out to you, someone put it in the chat, I don't think you saw it, about a patch for the vaccine. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I don't know what to answer to that. Is that something new? Can somebody comment on this? I have not heard this. New patch for delivery. I mean, the patch technology has been around for a long time. I have not heard the patch technology for the vaccines. So maybe, Irene, you can find the link for this and email it to me so I can take a look at it.
I'll look it up and email it to you if what I find. I'll do the research. Okay.
All right. Back to Dr. Orceyre.
Okay. So I just want to tag team with Dr. Kogan about some great treatments to keep in mind now that we're heading into the fall and winter. If you've been my patient, you probably know this one. I call it the warming socks treatment. Oh, I just lost everybody. Hold on. I don't want to look at myself full screen. So there's a treatment that I call a warming socks treatment, and I sent the handout to the group to be posted on the, I guess there's a place where they post everything. So there will be a handout posted about this. If you can't find it, you can always message me. I'm happy to send it. And it's a simple treatment, and hear me out before you decide you don't want to do it. It's a great treatment for kids too. So if you're a parent and you have young kids, they love it. But it's a treatment that stimulates the body's natural immunity. And it does this through the contraction and expansion properties of hot and cold water and the vascular system. So when we put cold up against our skin, for example, the superficial blood vessels will constrict because of the cold. But anytime the superficial blood vessels constrict, the deeper blood vessels dilate. They get bigger and allow more blood flow. And then if we put warm superficially, it will dilate the superficial blood vessels, but the deep ones will constrict. They kind of mirror each other. So we use hot and cold through water topically to create a pumping action of the blood vessels. And what the pumping action of the blood vessels does is it circulates the blood through the body. And why is that helpful? Well, because the blood carries all of our immune chemicals and it gets rid of all of the byproducts from our cells. So it's almost like we're improving the filtration, we're improving the ability of the immune system to reach all the parts of the body. And the way this treatment works is, I have my visual aids here. You need a pair of cotton socks, as cotton as you can find them these days. It's kind of hard to find cotton socks, and a pair of wool socks. And you take the cotton socks and you get them wet. And then you get them wet with cold water and you wring them out so that they're not dripping. And you put them on your feet. That's the hardest part of this whole treatment. And if you're someone like the person in the chat who said that they can't stand, like their feet get really cold, you can take a hot shower first. You can take a hot bath first, because this is a treatment you generally want to do before you get into bed. So once you wring out the cotton socks, you put them on your feet, then you take your dry wool socks and you put them on top and you completely cover those cotton socks. And then you get into bed and you wrap yourself up warmly. So typically what happens is, if you're able, it creates the pumping action very shortly. Within a matter of minutes, the cotton socks warm up, because what happens is your blood goes down there to warm up those feet and starts the pumping action. Then the wool socks wick off some of the moisture and it cools it down. And then the blood goes back down to warm them up again. And it creates this circulation that's eventually dries up the cotton socks. I've done this treatment, I don't know how many, I can't even count how many times I've done it. And every time I wake up in the morning and the socks are totally dry. And usually my feet are warm within about 2 minutes. The body warms up those cotton socks. I have known a few people in my life who had a condition called Raynaud's syndrome, or Raynaud's, and one person I knew, she basically refused to do this treatment because she was so terrified of getting an activation of her Raynaud's, although I don't think she ever actually had one. But other than that, there's not a lot of reasons, that someone couldn't do this treatment. And it's very simple. It's making use of your body's own natural vitality, its natural healing force to stimulate the immune system. So a lot of times I'll use this, like if I feel like I'm coming down with something and it's just the very beginning, I'll do a warming socks when I go to bed. And a lot of times it'll just kick whatever's going on. My body will just feel better in the morning. So it's a really easy, cheap, non-invasive treatment that you can do. And especially with kids, like I taught this to my nephews when they were really little and they just ask for it now. So I think I need warming socks tonight. So it's a great treatment. And if you have any questions about it, you can certainly post that in the chat. And that's the treatment I wanted to share with you. A couple of other things I want to just mention, just to tag team with what Dr. Kogan said about diet. Keep in mind that all of the antioxidants and antivirals that are in the food we eat you can get by having a more colorful diet. So if you're going to make a soup or a stew, you want to have as many different colors in there as you can. So, you know, for example, vitamin C, you can't really cook that, but beta carotene coming from orange and red foods turns into vitamin A in our body, which is a very potent antiviral. So also making a mushroom broth. So if you're someone that makes your own bone broth or your own chicken stock or whatever you might do, adding in some mushrooms, some wild mushrooms like shiitake that you get at the farmer's market, and letting them boil for several hours can help extract some of the chemicals that are very immune supportive and that we hear a lot about from mushrooms. If you just eat mushrooms, you won't be able to get those chemicals because they're bound in the mushroom. You can't just get them very easily. But if you boil the mushrooms for some time, like we do with traditional Chinese medicine, those benefits will come out. The socks I do whenever I need it. If you feel like you're kind of running low, you could do it every single night. If you like it and you just want to have a weekly tune-up, that's fine. So I kind of do it on an as-needed basis. No, the technique will not work with any kind of sock. The handout specifies, but I think the most important is the wool because of the wicking action. So if you're using a synthetic, it's not going to have the same benefit. So I think it's anything that wicks. I'm not really a fabric person, so I know that there might be some synthetics that do the wicking, but you want to have that, you want to have something lightweight on the inside so that it's able to dry out eventually, and you want to have something wicking on the outside. Okay, great.
There was a long haul question about long hauler.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Address that. So yeah, I have not heard of any new treatment, quote unquote, but I will tell you that since now we have more and more patients and we're seeing what happens. Generally speaking, it appears that combination of mitochondrial boosters, acupuncture, and vitamin C, and we have a very rapid improvement in almost everybody. I have heard that from a few of my colleagues. So it seems like if you treat it as any other post-viral syndrome, there is a better responses. The fact that nothing is offered in standard of care doesn't really mean much of anything. So that's really all I can say for now. But it is a pretty individualized treatment, because when I said mitochondrial boosting, you have to test for that. You have to get a careful assessment, take a look at what nutritional disparities, like what nutritionally is off, etc. And also there's quite a number of different symptoms, so it also heavily depends on what's going on. And cognitive issues are the hardest to address. That's been our experience, I think, universally. And good percent of people present with those, versus the actual exhaustion and kind of breathing issues are the easiest ones to address. So that's all I'm going to say. I don't think anybody actually have a good data on particular protocols. I think this is like basically all coming out now. Mark Hyman on Instagram and also on YouTube, I think he posted a long interview with what's his name? Galland. I think I want to say Leo Galland, who's in New York. He's a pretty famous long-term, one of the grandfathers of clinical integrative medicine. So Leo saw a lot of post-COVID patients, and I think there's a whole interview for a long period, like for an hour, in terms of what particularities of those protocols are. All right, there's more questions. That's for you, Deirdre. I don't know if you answered this synthetic versus silk sock liners.
I did, but I sent it to the wrong person. I just realized.
Okay.
I just said it might work. I've never tried, but if you understand the idea and the socks are dry in the morning, you should be good. Yeah.
And of course, if you're been listening to me before, although I probably can't speak to this since when I got sick, I had a hard time doing my cold showers. I just restarted them recently. This is not something I think you can do if you're not feeling well. You have to be feeling reasonably well to do something
The warming
like that.
socks or the cold shower?
No, cold showers. Yeah. But the cold showers are immune boosters. So again, they're not going to necessarily help you to get over something, but they will help you to prevent things or minimize the severity of an infection. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention, sort of real quick. So I think there's a misconception. People always sort of want to not have any colds. That's a gross misunderstanding of what the immune system does. You actually do want to have colds periodically because they are, in a way, shifting your immune system. And the thinking is that that's actually a good thing. So if you have the cold every month, it's not good. But if you have them once or twice a season, they're mild, they quickly pass. You shouldn't try to have no cold symptoms at all. In fact, quite often, we say people who have zero cold symptoms and yet they have some immune compromise, that's not necessarily a balanced state of affairs. So don't try to eliminate all the colds. Just try to make sure you pass through them very quickly without much of a complications or anything in a day or two, and you have all these tools we've been covering to support yourself. And that's it. So that's exactly 12:30. Good timing. And I think we got done with the questions. So that's it.
So time for our practice. Okay, do we go till 3?
Yeah, we go till 3. Our new rule is not to leave time for questions at the end, so people don't feel like digesting more medical information. So you can take, if you finish a little early, we're just going to finish a little early, a couple minutes.
Okay, great. So the practice I would like to do today with you is called the Microcosmic Orbit meditation, which sounds very fancy. I'll explain a little bit about it first. If you've come to see me for acupuncture, you probably have done this meditation. I teach it during acupuncture treatments because it harnesses the power of the mind, and rather than trying to turn the mind off, when we visualize, we're actually using our mind to support whatever we're trying to do. So as people lie on the table, I'll have them do this meditation as a way to, prevent, instead of thinking about your grocery list or something like that, you use your mind to help the treatment. The reason it's called Microcosmic Orbit is because it reflects the macrocosmic orbit. In Chinese medicine and Chinese medical philosophy, the belief is that everything that happens in our human body is a reflection of what happens in the natural world. And you may have heard of the 5 elements, which is one way, that's how the Chinese learned to break up the energies of the universe, so to speak. Not to get too grandiose about it, but that's really what it is. Each indigenous culture and their spirituality and their indigenous medicines have their own way of breaking up the energy in the world and using it, teaching others how to use it for health and healing and also for spiritual practices. So, a lot of people have heard of the Native Americans and the 4 elements. We have the doshas in Ayurveda, in Indian medicine. So there are a lot of different ways. You have the 4 elements in indigenous Celtic practices. So in Chinese medicine, we talk about the 5 elements. And the 5 elements occur in nature, but they also occur in our body. And that's how we can use the 5 elements for healing and balancing. Well, also, the movements of the sky occur within our own body. So the movements of the sky are called the macrocosmic orbit. And, we're talking about the sun and the moon and the planets and the stars. And shamanic Chinese practitioners, thousands of years ago, looked to the sky to understand this energy, and then they found that energy within the human body. And that was called the microcosmic orbit. So you've got the macrocosmic and you've got the microcosmic. And you really don't have to understand any of this. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. Really what we're going to do is we're going to use our mind and our breathing in a meditation, which will help circulate and harmonize the energy in our body. If it helps you to think about the sun and the stars, that's great, but you don't have to. So go ahead and get comfortable. And I find it's usually helpful to close your eyes, although if you're a practitioner who's used to doing visualizations with your eyes open, that's totally fine too. But it's good to be relaxed so that you can feel your body. So if you want to lie down or put your legs out, you want to be warm, comfortable, and relaxed. And I see people are turning off their video, which is just fine if you want to do that. Sometimes that helps with the relaxation. Okay, so first off, just notice your breathing. You might be breathing quickly. You might be breathing slowly. You might be breathing kind of shallowly, where your breath is just up in the top part of your chest. Or you might be breathing deeply, where the breath is going deeper down even into the abdomen. And there's no right or wrong here. It's just noticing what your body is doing naturally. And even noticing, you may observe that the breath slows a little bit or deepens. While you're observing, see if there are any areas of your body that feel tight or stuck or sore or painful even. If there is any place that feels a bit stuck or painful, try to bring the breath there as you inhale. Using your attention to call the breath to that place in your body. So to start this visualization, picture a ball of light right between your legs. It's kind of a weird request, but there is a point between our legs. The anatomical location is called the perineum. It's right between the genitalia and the anus. There's a little area there. And it's called, in Chinese medicine, it's called the earthly door. And it connects us to the earth. So picture a ball of light at the earthly door. Now, some people are very mental and they can visualize a ball of light. Some people are more physical and they actually feel the ball of light. They sense it and see what you're doing. And either way is fine. You might also notice a color to the ball of light. It might be a color of one of the 5 elements. So green light will help move liver chi, kind of helps break up stress and irritability, like the green of springtime, the green of new leaves on the trees or shoots coming up through the ground. Or you might notice that the light is dark, like maybe a dark blue or even a black light. And that's the kidney, which in the wintertime, we go into hibernation, and the kidney is the hidden place that we want to bring energy. Some people, it's a golden light or a white light. Any color is just fine. So we're going to breathe normally in this visualization. You don't have to do anything to your breath, but we're going to use the breathing to move this ball of light. On your next inhale, visualize the ball of light going up the back. So it makes a straight line up the back, across the buttocks, up the spine, up the back of the neck, up the back of the head, all the way to the top of the head. And at the top of the head, we have the heavenly door. And this is what connects us with universal energy. Then as we exhale, we bring this ball of light down the front. So same thing, a straight line down the forehead, down the nose, across the jaw, the chin, I mean, the neck, the chest, the sternum, down the abdomen, and between the legs again. So probably during the time I was explaining that, you did a couple of cycles, which is just fine. And that's all we're going to do. We're going to breathe for a while, and we're going to follow this light up and down. And this is the microcosmic orbit. So I'm going to be silent now for a few minutes, and we'll all just do this on our own. So a couple of things you might notice while you're cycling the ball of light. You may notice that there are some spots where the circulation kind of stutters. And it seems like it doesn't flow as well, or you can't visualize as well. Sometimes this is diagnostic energetically, areas of stuck chi or stuck energy. So you just make a note of it. You can ask about it later or look it up. Different areas of the body have different channels that run there, and sometimes it can give us some information about what's needed. Also, if you've been coming to these Fridays, I'm sure you've done different breathing techniques. If you want to work with your breathing a little bit, you can gently extend the exhalation. So extending that exhalation and making that part of the cycle a bit longer invokes the rest and relax part of the nervous system. And if you're someone that does advanced breathing techniques, you could certainly pause at the earthly door and pause at the heavenly door. But that's not necessary for everyone. I often use this meditation when I feel that someone needs balancing. It's great for insomnia or sleeping difficulties, anxiety. It's also good at the turning of the seasons, when the 5 elements become slightly imbalanced due to the energetic shifts in nature. And sometimes I find myself just doing this when I'm standing in line somewhere or at random times. And I'll just add a little something. If you have an area of your body that is not well right now, so maybe some pain or an illness that can be localized to a certain area of the body, you can also kind of play with moving the light to that spot as you breathe. And even just a couple of breaths with the light holding in that spot as a way of focusing the body's healing energy And let's gently bring our attention back to our whole body, back to the here and now. Noticing any sounds in the room, any sensations of temperature or pressure. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And come back to the meeting. That was about 10 minutes. The actual meditation was about 10 minutes. You could certainly go longer. In the acupuncture treatments, you know, it can be 20, 30 minutes, sometimes longer. I'm very happy to answer questions on the chat or anything else. I don't know what we usually do at the end. Misha, is there anything?
No, we can only answer questions that are related to your practice.
Right.
So if anybody wants to comment or something to add.
If anyone wants to share an experience, I'm always interested what kind of colors people come to people. Yes, Linda, the extended exhale is just the usual activation of the vagus nerve, the parasympathetic nervous response. Yeah, I really like how it uses the mind. It's like focusing the mind. I have a couple of different visualizations I do that focus the mind during acupuncture treatments. Yeah, this is great. So a white light, yellow, in Chinese medicine, yellow is the spleen and stomach, which is the earth element. And that can have to do with, you know, calming down worry, bringing equanimity. It can also have to do with digestion, with fluid metabolism. I already talked about the black light being kidney related. White light doesn't really have, I mean, I guess white light would be the metal element, although I really think white light also has to do with the heavenly door and bringing in the connection to the support from the universal energy. But if, you know, the color white in Chinese medicine goes with the metal element, and the emotion that typically becomes, causes stuckness of the metal is a deep, deep grief. I don't know if that resonates, Linda, but white light can be a lot of different things, I think. For the sore spot, Orit, what I usually do, I kind of blended two different visualizations there, but typically what I do for, if I'm trying to focus on an area of the body, is I'll have the patient inhale whatever color light through all the pores in their body. So you imagine light coming in through every pore, and then on the exhalation, that light goes to the area that needs support and healing. And then as you inhale, you bring in more, and as you exhale, you focus it on that area. For some reason, I'm focusing on my left hip right now, but that kind of is like bringing in the support of the what I'm calling the universal energy, which is a, you know, a whole nother thing, but it's like the chi of the universe, like the natural world. We don't have to do it all on our own, we can bring in assistance from the outside. Oh, and I set my timer. Purple light is, purple, gosh, I don't know what purple is in Chinese medicine, but in chakras, I don't remember my chakra colors very well. I just know green is the heart. Roy G. Yeah, I think purple is the crown. Also the crown. I always have to go Roy G. Biv, starting with R at the base. Yellow, as I said, is earth element, and red is the fire element, which is the heart, the small intestine, the pericardium. And the emotion there tends to be overstimulation, like they call it mania. But I think of it as like overstimulation, like over agitation. So wanting to calm that down. Oh my gosh, Linda, that's such a good question. I'm certain you could make use of that because it is a microcosmic orbit. So when things are happening in the sky, it's reflected in our body. But this visualization is really just a gross, it's a gross sensing of those energies, just the cycling. But I'm sure a sensitive person could really notice that. Yeah, great. Thank you for the questions. I love this meditation and I hope you can make use of it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Orceyre.